Welcome, everyone, to the Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators, and thanks for joining us. On this podcast, we'll explore leadership, innovation, and growth in the life sciences sector. I'm Don Alexander, founder of GeneCoda, a boutique executive search firm dedicated to connecting visionary leaders with life sciences companies shaping the future of therapeutics and scientific tools. On each episode, we'll dive into candid conversations with industry pioneers, uncovering strategies, insights, and real-world experiences that drive success in our industry. If you're interested in presenting as a guest of a future episode, please scan the barcode image at the top of my video frame and follow the instructions. Now I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. Charles Swindell, the CEO of Glycotest. Charles has over 30 years of experience in biopharmaceutical R&D product development and senior management experience in entrepreneurial life sciences companies. He's been head of R&D at two companies, one in which he led the team during advancement of an oncology product into phase 3 clinical development and was part of the senior management group that sold the business to a major Japanese pharma company, and another in which he was part of a turnaround effort that refocused the company on biologic product development, played the lead role in the acquisition of a glycoengineering technology platform from a Fortune 100 company, and launched an endocrinology product development program. Between these two positions, Charles was part of a small senior team that optioned a late-stage oral hyperlipidemia product from a major university, took it through an end of phase 2 meeting with the FDA, and then sold the rights to a venture-backed company. He spent his earlier career in academia, where he ran an internationally recognized NIH-funded research program, invented and licensed a manufacturing process operated by a major generic pharma company, and co-invented the above late-stage oncology product. Charles received his PhD from Rice University and was a Swiss National Science Foundation postdoctoral fellow in Zurich, Switzerland. And when not running Glycotest, Charles enjoys his Labrador retrievers. His family pets include a champion, a grand champion, and another one. So, Charles, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Don, and thanks for the opportunity to participate today.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. So, Charles, let's talk a little bit about your career journey and your leadership philosophy. What inspired your journey into the biopharmaceutical industry, particularly focusing most recently on liver disease diagnostics?
Well, I was originally trained as an organic chemist, and as you already alluded to, for many years ran an academic research program, an NIH-funded venture. And during that time, I had the good fortune of collaborating with several industry organizations, and had the opportunity to invent several impactful products and manufacturing processes. I invented a manufacturing process for the production of Taxol, the cancer drug, and that was eventually commercialized by Pfizer. And during this time, I did a collaborative project with a Philadelphia area startup called Protarga, ended up inventing or co-inventing all the products in their pipeline, and then had the opportunity to jump ship from academia to the dark side, as we used to say, to run R&D at Protarga, and actually was able to shepherd one of the products that I had a hand in inventing, an oncology product, into phase 3 before we sold the business to Daiichi Sankyo. So it was a natural transition from this experience, largely in oncology, into Glycotest, where again we're focused on oncology-related products, in this case, tests for early-stage liver cancer.
That's a great overview, Charles. Are there other pivotal moments in your career that kind of led up to your current role at Glycotest?
Well, the key thing for my involvement in Glycotest is that I was between opportunities doing some consulting work for actually a London-based financial firm called EMV Capital. At the time, they were called Net Scientific. And they really began as a family office that then became a publicly listed firm in London, focused on early stage companies, mainly life science companies, but not exclusively. And they had licensed some technology related to liver disease, diagnostic tests for liver disease, biomarkers, novel assays, out of Drexel University and the Blumberg Institute, a couple of Philadelphia area institutions. And my initial project with them terminated. They were looking for the first employee to come into Glycotest, formulate the business plan around what was really at the time sort of a gaggle of very interesting assets, but without any shape around particular product development programs. So I did that. Make a long story short, that ultimately led to a Series A financing and a licensing deal with a Chinese strategic, Fosun Pharma, and more recently, completion of the enrollment phase of a very large, for us certainly, clinical validation study for our flagship test for early stage liver cancer, a product that we call the HCC panel.
Fantastic. You've led teams at various companies throughout your career, and I was just curious how your leadership philosophy has evolved over the years, especially, I guess, as it pertains to leading a company the size of Glycotest.
So, Don, I'm not sure this counts as philosophy, but I think one of the most important lessons that I've learned from being involved in a number of entrepreneurial companies is the importance of efficient management of cash and efficient deployment of capital. We all know that this is, incredibly important in the current tough market. But I think it's too easy for companies to spend too much money too quickly in ways that simply don't move the needle for the company. The other thing that's important, and this is certainly very much related, is the importance of judicious involvement of external resources, outsourcing. It's critically important not to duplicate investment in internal resources that are easily found elsewhere and quite often practiced much better than you would be able to do internally. So I think efficiency in startups is just critically important.
Absolutely. Efficiency and capital, paying attention to capital. That's great, Charles. What about, let's move into the innovation and trends in liver disease diagnostics. And maybe if you could, for our audience, explain a little bit about how Glycotest technology works and how it addresses key challenges in detecting liver diseases.
Sure. Just a little bit of background first. The serious liver disease space is just one that's exploding, primarily because of so-called non-viral hepatitis. This is a condition that used to be called NASH. Now, somewhat confusingly, it's called MASH. But this is the form of hepatitis that is essentially the manifestation in the liver of metabolic disease. Metabolic disease is the combination of obesity, high blood glucose, high blood triglycerides, low HDL. And it has a number of manifestations in the body, but certainly in the liver, it causes something very much akin to viral hepatitis in some respects, in that it can lead to fibrosis and ultimately culminate in cirrhosis, and it can transition to cancer. The mortality and incidence associated with liver cancer is just exploding alarmingly, certainly in Western populations. Early detection of liver cancer is a serious problem. It's a serious unmet need. Current standard of care for early detection, and here I'm really talking about what is in the space is referred to as surveillance testing. So these are tests that are performed on a regular basis in the high-risk population to direct patients in the next stage to definitive diagnosis, typically by CT or MRI. The surveillance tests are routinely applied tests. Current standard of care for liver cancer surveillance testing only has a sensitivity of around 60%. And what this means is that 40% of patients with curable early stage disease are simply being missed. They show up with normal values. They remain in the surveillance testing system, hopefully, but very often they have asymptomatic disease that then transitions to late stage disease. And at that point, they're simply no longer eligible for potentially curable therapy. So that's the problem that we're addressing. When we started our work in this space, there really wasn't a lot of activity. And what has changed is that we now have a number of competitors. That's good for patients. We need multiple technical approaches to be applied to this problem. But it's still an unmet need. In terms of our approach, one of the things that differentiates us from our competitors is the technology that we apply. So we look for disease signals for early stage liver cancer that are associated with sugars, more specifically sugars that are attached to proteins that are associated with the liver, so-called glycoproteins. So over 50% of the proteins in the human body are glycoproteins, proteins that are decorated with sugars. Each protein has its own characteristic profile of sugars. The sugars have various different kinds of structures. That leads to the diversity that you find associated with glycoproteins. And the other key thing is that these glycan profiles can be altered abnormally in disease. That's what we focus on. So we use mass spectroscopy to detect alterations in the sugars associated with these glycoproteins that are intimately involved in liver disease, specifically liver cancer.
Gotcha. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that, Charles. Are there other trends, I suppose, in liver disease, possibly oncology, on a broader construct in the diagnostics field that are exciting to you, or yeah, I guess what's most exciting to you right now?
Well, we're very excited about what we do, obviously.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of focus on nucleic acid-based tests that look for alterations in DNA and RNA, especially in circulation in the blood. There's no question that given the severity of the unmet need in the liver cancer space for upfront surveillance testing, that we need multiple technical approaches to be pursued. A lot of this activity, as I've said, is focused on nucleic acid-based technology. And that's a key way that we're differentiated. We're taking a very different perspective on this. Very few other companies are doing this. We all need to work together on this. Someone is going to ultimately end up solving the problem. But the role that we believe that we're playing is that we're offering a differentiated technology approach to solving this problem.
Absolutely. It does sound highly differentiated, Charles. Let's talk a little bit about scaling, funding, and business strategy as far as the company goes. I guess just starting off, what it has been the biggest challenge or challenges in scaling Glycotest, and how have you overcome those?
Funding is always a problem, right? I mean, it's always a challenge, especially for early stage companies. And I think you just have to be patient. You have to have a good network. You have to work hard to expand your network. Beyond that, Don, I've built product development programs now in multiple companies. And as companies know, and you know this very well because it's your business, building teams is critically important. One of the things that I've observed in the kinds of startup entrepreneurial companies I've been involved in is that hiring senior people is often easier than hiring good junior people. It's often very, or we can say very easy, but it's relatively easier to identify good senior people who perhaps have gotten frustrated by working in larger organizations What's often a challenge in scaling companies is finding good junior folks. The junior folks, wanting to focus on validating their careers by working in larger organizations, which is understandable. Glycotest has been so far an extremely lean organization for the reasons that I outlined earlier. But we will certainly need to grow, and we'll need to confront these issues, which I've certainly gone through in other companies.
Absolutely. Just a quick follow-on to that, Charles. Do you think there might be, or what do you think are the reasons maybe behind the challenges in particular with more junior level people in finding them and onboarding them
I
based on
think in my experience, it really is the issue of, young people want to work for big companies. They want to have name brand employers on their resumes. And I understand that. That can be important. The more senior people have gotten past that point, and as I said, many of them are very good people that just are not at home in large bureaucratic organizations. And I think one of the things that smaller, more nimble startups offer are work environments where decisions are made more quickly, where people may feel that they have a more important role in decision making, and they certainly do, and which are just less process focused, less bureaucratic. There's certainly folks who are happier in that sort of environment, and that's great. It's important for large organizations to have effective teams too. But I think the kinds of folks that are attracted to smaller entrepreneurial companies are just, they're just a different, they're a different cast of characters.
Thanks for that, Charles. Now, a few months back, you all did or formed a partnership, I guess, with the University of Georgia's Complex Carbohydrate Research Center, the CCRC, I suppose. And I was wondering if you could reflect on how that came about and, what in the company's growth.
Yeah, the impact is certainly going to be huge, and it's a very important partnership we're very proud of. First of all, just kudos to the University of Georgia CCRC. This is an incredibly important resource worldwide in expertise in exactly the kind of science that we are involving in our diagnostic test. That is science focused on carbohydrates, sugars, glycoproteins, et cetera. There's just a lot of incredibly good talent down there and laboratory capability. We had actually started working with University of Georgia CCRC several years ago. It was a smaller project, certainly a very important one. So we knew them very well. And so when the time came to focus on the assays that we want to involve in the commercial version of the HCC panel, the choice was pretty obvious. We reached out to them again. They've been incredibly good to work with. Also on the business level, certainly the technical folks are superb, and the project in a technical sense is going very well. But the business people are also very good to work with. It took no time at all to finalize the agreements around the project and get it kicked off. So they've been wonderful partners.
Fantastic. It's great to have that kind of resource. Let me ask you in a general sense, Charles, what advice would you give to biotech startups, given the challenging market, I suppose, in particular? What advice would you have for these biotech startups seeking funding and strategic partnerships, given today's challenging landscape?
I think Don, it's a certain amount of patience. I think the number of conversations you have to have these days is extensive. It's just, those are just the facts that we face right now. I can tell you that for us, it was critical that we execute this strategic partnership with Fosun Pharma in China very early on. every company has to decide for itself, what is the best timing for partnering. Certainly, there are often strong arguments against partnering too early. But for us, it was key because it enabled us to do a couple of critical things. It brought in important investment into the company, and it enabled us to move our US commercialization program forward. But it also enabled us to access the huge Chinese liver disease market. I think something like 350,000 people a year in China die of liver cancer. It's almost half of liver cancer deaths worldwide. So if you're in the liver disease space, you need to be in China. You need to be able to try to help them deal with this very serious healthcare problem. Um, and and we've done that through Fosun. Fosun is operating independently of us. They have a license to our suite of biomarkers, tests, assays, et cetera, all of our technology. So being able to tap into two huge markets simultaneously, one through a partner, one internally, is certainly a big asset.
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate that, Charles. Let's talk a little bit about the future visioning. How is Glycotest, I guess, preparing for future challenges and opportunities and liver disease diagnostics? Maybe something we haven't covered already.
So I think one of the things that we did right very early on, and it's by no means a completed project, but we laid the groundwork for coverage and reimbursement. And our friends in drug development, and I was in the drug development space for many, many years, may take coverage and reimbursement for granted, but in the diagnostic space, it's critically important to pay attention to this. I think that's one of the differentiators of diagnostics versus drugs. Launching a diagnostic is one thing; it's an important milestone for obvious reasons. But it's also important to get paid. And I think in the diagnostic space, we naturally have to pay more attention to coverage and reimbursement. We were fortunate to work with some important sources of outside expertise to develop strategies around seeking coverage and reimbursement, pricing, coding, developing the clinical utility data package that is required to get a positive decision from Medicare. And Medicare, of course, is an important gateway to private payer coverage and reimbursement. So I think that's, it's perhaps specific to us in the diagnostic space, but that's certainly one of the things that we've done to look forward.
That's great. I was trying to think through that as you mentioned. I was curious about how early in the process that you all looked at this market-based coverage, because it seems to me again, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that you all may have done that earlier than a lot of companies out there may have done. So just curious about what, that inflection point, what made you say, we need to start looking at this now, and any guidance for other companies that may be tuning in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Don. It is in fact one of the earliest things that we did. This was my first diagnostic experience, and I did come from a drug development background, so I needed to get myself educated in this space very quickly. And I started reaching out to folks, some of which have gotten involved with us on a more formal basis. And one of the things that I was taught early on is the companies that have succeeded in a technical and clinical way in launching a test, but have delayed focus on coverage and reimbursement until too late. And many of them have failed, not because they didn't have a good product, but because they didn't worry about being paid for that product. That was a lesson I took to heart. And so we focused on this starting several years ago. And it's a process, and it takes a number of inputs. And there are a number of different components to the dossier that you ultimately need to put together for a positive coverage and reimbursement decision. But I don't think it's too early. It really needs to progress in parallel with the technical and clinical program.
Interesting perspective, Charles. Thanks for that. Can you share any, I suppose, upcoming initiatives or projects that you're particularly excited about?
Our focus right now is really on our partnership with the University of Georgia.
Mhm.
That's going to be a watershed event that is culmination of that project, and it will culminate in completion of the assays that have come from this clinical validation study that I referred to earlier.
Mhm.
Um, that will provide confirmation of the performance of the HCC panel and a formal prospective study, and that will be a watershed event for Glycotest.
Fantastic. That's great. And Charles, what do you see, I guess, as the most promising developments in liver disease diagnostics over the next 5, maybe 10 years? Obviously, Glycotest, but anything else on that front?
Yeah, I think eliminating the frustration that we have now, in the sense that we have in hand curative therapeutic approaches to deal with liver cancer if it's caught early enough. It's not unlike a situation with many other tumor types, but it's an unsolved problem in the liver cancer space. So we know how to cure early stage disease. We don't need to invent or develop new modalities to do that. We simply cannot effectively find these folks. And that's really the problem that we aim to solve. And that's what our competitors in the space are aiming to solve. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll have that problem solved. I think that's the most important development that I look forward to.
Well, that's great to hear. Um, are there any final thoughts, Charles, as we come to the end here? Any final thoughts or advice that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, this is a sentiment that I share often. It's perhaps a little corny, but I do think it's a privilege for us working in life science companies as opposed to, companies that are developing widgets that may be amusing but are not critical. It's a privilege to be developing products that have an impact on human health and human longevity. And I think we all need to take that very seriously. But there are a lot of other folks out there working who don't have that advantage in their careers.
Absolutely. Contributions to human health. That's great, Charles. Final question. How can listeners connect with you or learn more about Glycotest?
Follow me and Glycotest on LinkedIn and follow us on glycotest.com. And we will certainly make the world aware of progress as we make it.
Fantastic, Charles. Thanks so much for being on today. That wraps up this episode of Executive Insights for Life Sciences Innovators. Appreciated you tuning in and hope that you found today's conversation valuable. If you enjoyed the discussion, please be sure to leave a review and share it with your network. And please also mark your calendar for March 28th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time with Anna Kazanchian, the CEO of Sagmos Therapeutics. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.